Okay, good morning. Hello. I'm Liz Hansen from Chicago Boudoir Photography and really excited to be here with you today. If you can see us and hear us, would you please hit like or love or a little comment? The technology on this is always just a little bit tricky, so I'm really glad to be here with you today. This is our Live with Liz series where I interview local women who are making a difference. And I am so excited to be here today with Laura Folks. Thanks for being with us, Laura.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be talking to you today.
So, Laura Folks is a certified holistic health coach. And today she's going to be talking about what your quote unquote bad eating habits are really about. And there is no shame. So, today we're going to be talking about health, nutrition, eating with Laura. I'm really excited to talk to you about this topic. Guess what? We all have to eat every single day. So, everyone who's listening can relate to this. So, first off, Laura, thanks for being here, and I'd love to hear tell me a little bit about what you do and how you got into it.
Yeah, so I'll start with how I got into it first, and then we'll transition into what I do. So I struggled with my weight from the age of 12, went on many diets starting at the age of 13, and would yo-yo often on different diets, lose weight, gain it all back, plus more. And in 2006 or 2008, I lost 60 pounds and was able to keep it off and maintain it for the most part. And what I found, and didn't realize this at the time, but what I found is that I was still stuck in a cycle of eating well for a little while and staying within a really tight box almost of like eating well for a while, saying screw it, eating what I wanted, gaining a couple pounds, having to rein it in again. So really trying to control my weight and what I was eating, but it was like an all or nothing. So I was either really all in and really like good. And then there were times where I was like, screw it and eating whatever I wanted. And so it was very unbalanced for me and created a lot of stress around my eating and was a main focus of a lot of my thoughts. And so as I was working in advertising at the time, was losing my passion for that job and career. And so I started to think about what I wanted to do next. And I kept thinking about people coming to me for advice and guidance as they were going through their weight loss journeys too. And that really stayed in the back of my mind as I was exploring for about 4 years what my next career was going to be. And I found out about health coaching. This was in 2013. So this was before it really became a big um, industry, and learned about health coaching, was like, this is what I want to do. So went to the Institute for Integrative Nutrition to get my certification. And while I was getting my certification, I was introduced to a health coach who had been already practicing for a few years and was focusing on the relationship with food. And I was talking to her more from a business perspective, just to get a little bit more of an understanding of how she became a health coach, how she's had success and stuff. And as I was talking to her, I learned about her process called Truce with Food. And as she was explaining it to me, I was like, oh, I need this. So I started working with her to work on my relationship with food because I had never thought about it really. I always thought it was, I had to be like on a diet and just more around focusing on the food than really focusing on my relationship with it. So I started going through the process with her and learned so much about myself in that process. And that's when I was like, this is what I need to do with my clients. And I can share more about what that is, but I will pause because it looked like you had a question or a thought.
And it's just so interesting to hear you use the term relationship with food because I think so many of us can relate to that phrase. What does that mean to you to have a relationship with food?
Yeah, it's really because we do have to eat all the time. And to me, the relationship with food is it's not just the act of eating. There's so much more to food than just what we're putting in our mouths. And it's it can be a strained relationship where we're thinking about it a lot. There can be like a love hate relationship. Some people will say it feels like an abusive relationship, kind of where it like we beat ourselves up after eating things that we feel like we shouldn't eat or that are bad. And then on the flip side, there's the positive stuff, right? Where it's like it's celebration, it's connection, it's a way to really, it can be a way to help soothe us in times when we're feeling um, like when there's some emotional stuff that's coming up. So there's so much more to our eating and to food than just the food itself. Like we, most of us have a relationship with it in whatever way that looks like for us.
Yeah, interesting. So talk to me. Okay, so you got certified to be a health coach. You went to this integrative center. You met this woman. You did her Truce with Food course. So what do you do now to help people with food?
So since then, I've also been certified as a Truth with Food practitioner as well, working with Allie, my health coach, and she's been a huge mentor to me and throughout the process. So what there's a framework that we go through to really help figure out how we're actually using food as a sense of safety and how is it showing up. And often when we're turning to food and it feels like we're eating out of alignment with our goals, so whether that's binge eating, it could be restricting, it can be emotional eating, whatever that is, that to me is a sign or symptom that there's something else going on. And so I'm looking at that as how are we turning to food when our belonging feels at risk often. So that's a high level, but and I can go into more detail around that, but that's like
Yeah. So
the
you're
gist.
not just helping people lose weight, is what I
No,
understand you saying.
I don't promise weight loss at all. And often it is a goal that people have, but really it is more around feeling more comfortable and confident in their bodies with themselves and just clearing up a lot of that food noise where they're focusing so much on food that it's creating so much stress and it's taking them away from being able to do things that they really want to do. And they feel like if they could just free up some of that food noise, they would be able to be more present, take more risks, do more things with their lives. So it's really more about reconnecting with ourselves than it is really about the weight. And then weight loss may be a side effect of the work for some people. Some people it's not, but it isn't the focus of our work together.
I love that. So, okay, today we were the topic like that we were gonna that I brought up at the beginning was this. What does your quote unquote bad eating, what is it really about? So first off, tell me why you put bad eating in quotes.
Yeah.
Let's start there.
Yeah. So I put it in quotes because a lot of times people will say, like, oh, I've been bad or I've been good. So it's the way that we talk about it. And also, there's, we've been classifying food probably for years, especially with diet culture, that it's good or bad. So it's really, I don't look at what we're eating or how we're eating as good or bad. I put it in quotes because, again, that bad eating is more of like a sign or symptom to me that there's something else going on. So it's not really about the food. And there's also a lot of judgment that we put on ourselves based on our eating. And we want to shift away from that. And we really do shift away from that in the process that we go through as well, because we make a lot of meaning about ourselves and about things in life based on what we're doing, how we're reacting, and our how we're eating.
When we call foods or behaviors bad or good, what does that do? What effect do you feel like that has on people's relationship with food?
That's a really good question. It I would say it's not just about the relationship with food, but it's the relationship between themselves and how they're like the judgment that they're putting on themselves. So a lot of times it is when people will say, like, oh, I was bad, there can be some shame around that. Or there's like that judgment of like, oh, I have failed, or I don't have control or discipline or willpower. Like we internalize that and make it mean something about us versus what I would look at is what was going on that took you off track. Like if that is what it feels like is off track or led you to eat something that you felt like was out of alignment with your goals, what was actually taking you down that path that isn't really about lack of willpower, discipline, or that there's something wrong with you, or there's that judgment. That's what it can really do. There's so much more to it than just the label of the bad eating and where is that coming from?
Yeah, something that I think about a lot with bad foods and good foods, and I'm putting those both in quotes,
Mm-hmm.
is that for me, it's confusing. There, Okay, it seems to me, and I'm not a health coach, that's why I'm asking you, our food supply and what's available, it's so confusing and there's so many mixed messages about what foods are nutritious and and would make me feel good and what isn't, right? So like something that you might think is, packed with nutrition, when you look at the label, it's actually some ultra processed xanthan gum like Frankenstein food. But on the other side of the box, it's like whole grains. So like to me, that's part of the problem is what is offered in our world is confusing. There's like a lot of mixed
Mhm.
messages about food.
For sure. Yeah. And one of the things that comes up a lot too is there's we're conditioned in ways and also disconnected from what it is that we want to choose. It's more of what we feel like we should be eating or shouldn't be eating. And so what we really want to get to is that we can trust ourselves in our choices and also to get to a place where we are able to eat more naturally, like intuitively and mindfully. And when we work through what our relationship with food is all about and how we're trying to center safety or belonging, then we can make choices that are more in alignment with how we want to be eating. And some of that noise doesn't really matter because we naturally turn more towards the foods that are going to be more nourishing for us.
Interesting.
And there is education too. Like some people do need some more education, but most of my clients would say that they have so much nutrition information. They know they could teach nutrition classes. They have so much information, but they're just not consistently sticking with it and they don't know why. So that's, yes, can be times where we need to break through some of that clutter and some of the um, and figure out like what do these packages actually mean. And then on the flip side, there also can be times where we just need to be able to build some of that self-trust that we can make the decision that is more in alignment with how we want to be eating.
I heard you use the phrase intuitive eating, and I've heard that phrase like thrown out. Is that something that you incorporate into your training? What does that mean?
Yeah, so I'm not trained in intuitive eating, like the actual process. What tends to happen for people is as we work through what is actually happening with their relationship with food and where the story that they have created and the story is typically created earlier in our lives when we don't have the full context of what's happening around us, and so we internalize it and make things about us. So that can be if you grew up in a household where, like, I've had clients whose siblings had a health issue, and so they internalize that their sibling needs more support and their needs don't matter as much. And that wasn't explicitly said to them, but it was more, or yeah, it was more of an implicit thing that they took on and made it about them. So they have taken on that they can just sit more in the background, not speak up for their needs, and just accommodate everybody else. And their needs don't matter. But then, not that they don't matter at all, but that's how they internalize it and turn to food to kind of fill that. Or when they have a need and don't know how to speak up for it, they feed it.
I
And
think a lot
so,
of women, even if you didn't have a sibling with a health issue, I think a lot of women can relate to the idea that my needs come last. My
mhm,
needs don't matter. I must give and give and give to everyone else. And if
yep.
I take care of myself, it's selfish. Like I think a lot of us can relate to that.
Yeah. And so we turn to food to kind of feed that and to fill some of that void. And that can also be where there's that belonging that feels at risk because it may feel like I'm not as loved or not as connected. Um, and I've totally blanked on what your original question was. So
What is intuitive eating?
oh yeah. So as we work through that story and that piece of like where is it that they're actually craving some of that belonging or how are we using food to soothe, then they are more once that is kind of worked through and there's more clarity around that, then they're more naturally able to be more in tune with their bodies and be able to eat more intuitively based on what their bodies need because when people come to me at first, they're like, I've tried mindful eating, I've tried intuitive eating. And there's times where they're like, yeah, screw it. My body does want cookies or chocolate. But when we're coming from that place of like craving that security, that protection, that safety, it's easy to override what our body actually needs. And often we've disassociated and used food to disassociate, that we're not able to really get into in tune with what our bodies want and need. And so it kind of clears up some of that noise around our body and food as we work through the process and figure out how we are turning to food for that safety. So that's also kind of more of a result of the work together, is that then people are able to be more intuitive. So
Got it.
yes, it's incorporated, but also no at the same
Yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah. I mean, what I hear you saying basically is that like sometimes we can know a lot of things about what we should eat. We can know what's nutritious for us, but we still maybe binge or use food in an unhealthy way because we have some underlying emotional needs that we are trying to use food to meet. And what you can do as a coach is help people meet those needs without food. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep. And sometimes food may still be something that you want to use in certain times, and it's being able to be more in choice around that instead of feeling like the food is controlling us. It's how are we able to more consciously choose when we want to turn to food versus when it's not really serving us and is creating more of the cycle of like beating ourselves up and having that shame and guilt and stuff, like being able to work through that so it doesn't, we are able to, yeah, eat some, like I still will have donuts and cookies and pizza. And there are times where my husband and I we'll have two donuts in the house. It'll take us 4 days to eat the two donuts because we feel satisfied from just a couple of bites of it. Versus in the past, if I had two donuts in the house, there's no way I would have been able to like stop at just one or two bites. It would be, both donuts would be gone within 10 minutes. So it's really, and it's not like I'm not using the food for that satiation and satisfaction, like, but I do feel satisfied from it when I do eat it now.
Hmm. Hmm. What would you say? So I've heard before that like shame is just not like a very useful emotion, right? Because it doesn't actually help us change or make better choices. So if we're not shaming ourselves about quote unquote bad food choices, what are we doing instead?
That's a really great question. And shame is such an interesting thing because it's something that's been in my conversation and world for so long. And for me, I wasn't able to even identify that I felt shame until just 3 months ago. Um, so, and it's taken a lot of work, but yeah, it's really interesting with shame when we're not shaming ourselves. First of all, we need to even see where the shame is coming up, how it's coming up. And sometimes it takes layers. Like, I mean, it took me 9 years to be able to feel the shame and to experience it and see it, because our nervous system and our psyche and like it's protected me in so many ways. And it also probably is protecting others in some ways. And so it's not like we just flip a switch and the shame is gone. Um, and when we're not living steeped in that shame, it we can feel more satisfied and fulfilled. We can feel more present, connected. It just depends on why the shame is showing up and how that's protecting somebody. And it can just open up so much for people too.
I mean, I think it's really natural to feel shame when you do
Mhm.
something that's not in alignment with your goals or values, right? Like, okay, I don't actually want to eat 4 donuts for breakfast, but I did.
Mhm.
Then I think shame follows really naturally.
Yep.
I mean, that's just it's not that's very human, I should say.
Mhm.
Like very human say, I did something that's not in line with my goals and values. So instead of shaming myself now, what am I going to do instead? I'm going to say what?
The first thing is just to even see, the first step for me is that I work with people on is to see, like, bringing clarity and awareness to what were you turning to the donuts for? Because there isn't just one thing to say, or it's not like a mindset shift. Like, yes, there is mindset shift that happens, but first we need to identify what are you turning to the donuts for? Because even having that clarity and awareness of like, what is your story and how is it trying to protect you? Even that alone can shift from some of the shame. And I've had clients say it feels like a weight has been lifted, even though they may not have lost any weight. And it's just more of like that metaphor of feeling like they've been carrying something that's been weighing them down for so long and they didn't know what it was. And then once they can see it, it's like, oh, this is what I'm doing. This is why this is happening. And now it's something that I can change, because when we're subjected to it and we're just carrying it with us and we don't see it, then it feels like it's who I am and how life has to be. And that's when we can feel hopeless that things can change. But as we can bring more clarity and awareness to it, then that's when we can start to shift it. So I'm sorry I don't have one thing that people can say, but that is that's how it starts to shift and how we can start to release some of that shame, just even by having that clarity and insight into why we're turning to food in the first place. And then the shame starts. We can have more compassion with ourselves.
Yeah. Um, would you be willing to share a story of either your life or from someone that you've worked with? And of course, you don't need to share their name or their
Yeah.
details, but someone who was able through health coaching to make a change in their life that felt very meaningful. Would you be just willing to share a little story
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that?
Which one do I want to share? um, there's two that come to mind. I'll share one. So this woman came to me because she said that like it's easy to lose 100 pounds. Like I've lost 100 pounds and then I gain it right back, but like the weight loss itself is easy, but why is it not consistent, and why is it not sustaining? So we started working together, and quickly what she realized is that she is very hyper productive. So many of my clients are type A perfectionists and stuff, and she was so hyper productive that she couldn't do anything just at 100%. It had to all be 150%. So even creating an Excel spreadsheet, she couldn't just do a simple Excel spreadsheet. It had to be like the biggest, the best, the most intricate Excel spreadsheet, which is fine. And that also created a lot of stress. And when she was in this state of being hyperproductive, it was exhausting. So when coming home from work, she would plant herself on the couch, drink a bottle of wine, and eat food. And as we started to talk about that hyperproductivity and how that was actually trying to protect her, she got a lot of praise as a kid for her intelligence, for being hardworking and everything. So that is where her story is like, that's where she had value and worth was in, and that's how she felt valued and worthy, right? Because that's where she was getting a lot of the praise. And so she said at one point, she's like, I like being hyper productive sometimes, though. And I'm like, right, it's not that we want to take that away from your identity. It's, are there times where you feel hyper productive and are energized versus times where you're hyper productive and it depletes you? And she's like, absolutely. And the difference was when she was in choice around it and she was doing it because she wanted to be hyper productive versus when she was doing it as a way to be seen as valued and worthy and to get that acceptance and to belong, that's when it would deplete her because it wasn't aligned with her values and what was really important to her. So as we worked through, I mean, this showed up in so many different places of her life too. There would be times on the weekends where she was like, I need to reorganize a cabinet in my kitchen. And 8 hours later, she had reorganized her whole kitchen. So there was no nuance or discernment of what this hyperproductivity, like when to use it and when not to. As we worked through the process, the first thing that kind of fell by the wayside was her drinking. So she actually was able to come home and not just collapse on the couch and drink a bottle of wine. She stopped drinking, and it wasn't that she was restricting herself. She just didn't need it anymore or want it. And then her eating also had shifted. And as we went through the process, she also had been at her job for about 7 years. And as it got clearer to her what was important to her and what she really valued and what she wanted and needed, she realized that this job wasn't like the best fit for her. And she got contacted to become the like president or CEO of another organization. And she ended up taking that role. And she said that it was from the work that we had done, because if we hadn't worked through her story, she wouldn't have had that confidence and been able to take that risk and take on this big of a role. And so she was able to make that change. And then unfortunately, she was also diagnosed with breast cancer at the time, like shortly after our work together. And even through her cancer diagnosis and treatment, she said that the work we had done had really helped her bring some of the tools, because she would make jokes about, even in treatment, she was like, I'm going to be the best patient and the best student, and I'm going to show my oncologist that I'm going to beat this better than anybody else. So like even her story was coming up around that, and being able to see that that's what she was doing, and realizing and like bringing some nuance to that and discernment of like, do I need to be the best student? No. Like the best cancer patient? No. So it had a lot of effect, or a lot of impact throughout many various aspects of her life beyond just the food and drinking. Um, yeah, and there's more to that, but that was quite a bit.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. That's so powerful to see how this like story was impacting her in so many different ways.
Mhm.
The food and drink was like maybe the top of the pyramid for her, but then like when she peeled away the layers, it was affecting her in so many other ways as well.
Yeah, which is, it's true for like pretty much all my clients too, in the work that we do. So when people ask me what kind of results can they expect, I'm like, I don't know. It depends, because it depends on why we're turning to food in the first place. Because again, food is just the symptom. And so food or alcohol or even over shopping, it can be anything, over working out or not working out. Like it can show up in so many different areas. Um, but yeah, it usually is, there's something else. And so it can impact relationships, career, taking risks in life, just how we feel in our bodies, in life in general.
Well, Laura, it's been really great to chat with you and hear about the work you do and how you're helping so many women. To wrap up, I'd just like to ask you a question, which is who is a woman that has impacted your life significantly?
I already gave a preview to it, but my health coach, Allie, she has definitely impacted my life in so many ways. When I was introduced to her for, as a like just as a connection for as a health coach, going through the process myself was super impactful. And then we've been connected now for 10 years or so. And she's been a huge mentor to me. And the process that she developed that then, and also then trained me in and mentored me through, has been super impactful, not only for myself and my relationship with food, but also going from advertising to doing this work is so fulfilling and satisfying for me. And I never knew how fulfilling work could be. And so I owe a lot of all of that to her. And I'm so grateful to have met her and have had her as a part of my life.
So grateful for empowered women who help empower other women. Thank you, Allie. That's just I along almost every woman's journey, there's another woman who's helped them along the way. So,
And she's just one of many, of course, but
of course. Well, Laura, thank you so much for coming and joining us today. We will leave your information below for people who are interested in chatting with you, who are interested in working through their relationship with food, digging through their story and finding out why they are maybe doing behaviors that aren't in line with their values and their goals. So, thank you so much for sharing and for joining us. And if you are listening to us and you are a woman in the area who's made a difference, I would love to interview you as well. I'll leave the link for that as well. I'm Liz. I run the Chicago Boudoir Photography Studio, where I take photos to help empower women and help them see and reveal their own confidence. Thanks for being in this group, and thanks again for joining us today, Laura.
thank you so much for having me.